believe our next presenter is Dominic Del Fierro. Is Dominic with us?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Dominic. Hi, I'm Beth. It's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Wonderful. Okay, I believe, and Dominic, who is your advisor?
My advisor is Professor Rotaru.
Professor Rotaru. Okay, great. And is Professor Rotaru with us?
I'm not sure. Let me check.
I do not see Professor Rotaru at this time. But Dominic, what I will do is, since you sent an MP4, I will just share my screen and play that. Afterwards, I will ask your advisor to say a few words, and then we can take questions from anyone. Those of you who would like to ask a question may type it into, if you just push the little chat button at the bottom of your screen, that will send questions to me and I can read them aloud at the end. So Dominic, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, and I think you're gonna see Nathaniel's right now. I will go back to this. Okay, does that look like the one?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay, off we go.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dominic Del Fierro, and I am an international business and finance major here at St. Edward's University. I chose to do my honors thesis on fintech and financial inclusion, specifically on how countries can implement fintech with good regulatory practices to include the most amount of people and have impactful financial systems. The research question that I chose to focus on this semester was, does fintech enable impactful financial inclusion? And how do countries implement fintech to include the most amount of people? So an agenda of what we'll be covering today, in a little bit, I'll be giving a brief background into fintech and financial inclusion, then going into the history of financial inclusion and how it has been impacted by fintech over the last decade, then moving into regulatory sandboxes and interoperability, which are both good regulatory practices that countries can implement for more impactful inclusion in the long term. So fintech is short for financial technology, and it's the technology that enables and empowers banking and financial services. It's highly likely that you've interacted with fintech in some form recently. Some examples are digital payments, and companies that do this are PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, Cash App. Banking technology, banks have digitalized a lot of their processes over the years, and people are now able to deposit a check through their smartphone, transfer money through a mobile app, pay bills in the mobile app, etc. Also, file taxes, crowdfund, insurance, cryptocurrency, stock trading, savings accounts are all examples of different financial technology. Moving on to financial inclusion, the initiative grew popularity around the turn of the century, and it is the push for all individuals and businesses to have access to useful and affordable financial products and services. This includes transactions, payments, savings, credit, checking, insurance, all the financial services that leads to financial freedom for adults. And as of 2017, 1.7 billion people were still without a bank account globally. And so roughly around a third of the world were financially, quote unquote, excluded. Before financial inclusion was introduced in the 2000s, microfinance was widely regarded as the solution to global poverty. And the premise of microfinance was that financial institutions and governments would give impoverished communities access to very small loans, often ranging from as little as $2 to as big as $25,000, with terms of the loan being much shorter than the average loan. And the idea was that these loans would allow for these communities to see a direct increase in overall entrepreneurship and welfare. However, the reality on a large scale was that microfinance was counterproductive for the poor. It led to unreasonably high interest rates per annum. And from an empirical study from Latin America, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and South Africa, it showed that it led to a series of boom to bust episodes for many communities. As well, consumers would withdraw these loans to cover the their short-term needs and emergencies rather than to fund their long-term development. Microfinance institutions are still very popular today. We can often see it as called microcredit, but they utilize their services more as a micro bank for a savings account or a checking account. And they still offer these loans, but it's not widely recognized on a large scale like financial inclusion. So at the turn of the century, the discourse shifted largely from microfinance to financial inclusion. Countries began to recognize the need to focus on their financially excluded populations and bring them access to affordable financial products. As a result, the Alliance for Financial Inclusion was created in 2011 and comprised more than 80 financial institutions in 80 countries that represented more than 75% of the world's unbanked. The My Declaration, in alignment with the G20 high-level principles for digital financial inclusion, focused on creating an enabling regulatory environment to harness new fintech, protecting and empowering consumers, utilizing data for informed policymaking, and advancing synergies in financial inclusion for more impactful inclusion in the future. As a result, the financially excluded population decreased from 2.5 billion in 2011 to 1.7 billion in 2017. This decrease can largely be attributed to the increase in technology and mobile phones over the last decade. As of 2019, 5 billion people have access to a mobile phone worldwide. Additionally, 60% of the world's unbanked population has access to a mobile phone. This is important for two reasons. One of the main challenges for financially excluded populations is the distance to financial services. Often we see financially excluded communities in rural areas. With the increase in mobile phones and as banks continue to digitalize a lot of their processes, individuals in rural communities can join the financial system much easier. As well, with agent banking, a lot of the simple bank processes that traditionally would be completed in a brick and mortar bank can now be completed through agent banking and app-based banking transactions. As banks continue to digitalize a lot of their processes, agent banking allows for customers to utilize their process or their services for more simple needs like depositing and withdrawing cash. The increase in mobile phones allows for a significant penetration opportunity for peer-to-peer payments and lending platforms. This can be showcased in Kenya's M-Pesa, which has often been recognized as one of the most successful cases for the adoption of digital payments in a developing country. Moving on from digital payments, policy and regulation and good regulatory practices can actually lead to more impactful inclusion in the long run. One study looked deeper into the ecosystem surrounding the financially excluded and found that when regulatory framework focuses on two of the four factors being socioeconomic, technological, and political, that when regulation focused on two of those, financial inclusion was actually more impactful. This is compared to countries with moderate financial inclusion, where the regulation focused was a little bit too widespread and wasn't focused enough on the areas that needed the most resources. As well, Chen and Divan Beji found that when regulatory legislation is significantly changed, the most drastic financial inclusion actually happens. This is compared to incremental changes that see minimal to no impact on inclusion. So when regulation is focused and changed to affect the areas that need the most help, the most financial inclusion is actually going to happen. In 2019, Ernst & Young named these 5 barriers that have hindered the financially excluded from joining the financial system. However, studies have been shown that good regulatory practices can help the excluded overcome these barriers. One example that I would like to point out is when policies enhance financial literacy in countries, financial literacy has actually been shown to positively affect financial markets and deepen inclusion in the long run. This is because customers who are financial literate will actually make more informed decisions. And as a result, customers will actually demand better financial products to make these informed decisions. This will lead to more competition in the financial markets for financial products because customers will not settle for something that does not suit what their needs are. One great example of a good regulatory practice that countries can implement is a regulatory sandbox. And a regulatory sandbox is a testing environment in which businesses can test their novel products, services, business models, or delivery mechanisms without immediately incurring all of the normal consequences. And a regulatory sandbox is unique in the fact that it mutually benefits both the public and private sector. This is because on the public sector side, regulators, especially in an industry like fintech where it's innovating constantly, regulators can stay up to date on novel products, also enable technology that would most benefit both their customers and population, and build regulatory framework that would protect consumers and enable competition within the industry. On the private sector side, firms want to join a regulatory sandbox because one, it would heavily reduce both their regulatory uncertainty and regulatory fear. Regulatory uncertainty is when firms are unsure of what the regulation will be, especially for fintech, which is constantly innovating and regulation is constantly changing. Firms would want to join a sandbox to have close relationships with the regulators and kind of pick their mind on what they think legislation will be. As well, regulatory fear is like the fear that firms have to build a novel product but don't know what the regulation will be. So by being in this environment, not only can they test whatever products they have currently, but also kind of figure out what those novel products could be with the regulation. Also, for firms, being able to test in a live environment and get live feedback is highly valuable. And you can build these relationships with these regulators and fix your product. It's just a mutually beneficial environment for both the private and public sector. An example of a sandbox who has had a lot of success over the years is the UK's Financial Conduct Authority Sandbox. They opened in 2014 and has largely acted as the blueprint for a lot of regulatory sandboxes around the world. Since 2014, they have had 5 cohorts and have supported 686 firms. And for the firms supported and successfully tested, more than 80% are still in operation. Also, for firms who do test within a sandbox, not just simply the Financial Conduct Authority sandbox, but investors will look to sandboxes to invest in innovative products or services, knowing that there's going to be less regulatory uncertainty for these companies compared to any other firm that is testing in another innovative accelerator or outside of the sandbox. And you can see this through 135 million pounds in the first 3 years of funding. And another reason that this sandbox has had a lot of success is the defined mission and purpose that it was created with. So it has led to more, like a higher impact for both the firms and a contribution for fintech regulation. Another good regulatory practice that countries can implement is interoperability. And interoperability is the ability for systems to connect with one another. Specifically in fintech, interoperability has been present the most in mobile money payments and digital payments. However, we see interoperability in a lot of other industries. For example, the telecommunications industry and healthcare systems. And it's the ability to share not only information, but interconnect technologically and work together. So in a 20-country scan, the consultative group to assist the poor found that interoperability is present in almost all markets. However, meaningful and focused interoperability for impact is still nascent. And this can often be because it's a very complex and messy issue, and it requires a lot of work and a lot of cooperation between industry players and the regulators as well. But it has the opportunity to include so many more consumers into the financial services industry. For example, Tanzania implemented interoperability into their mobile money payments industry in 2014 through 2016. With the help of the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group, Tanzania saw the opportunity to include and connect millions of people. As well, the mobile money payments market was extremely well distributed compared to other countries in Africa. For example, the top player in the mobile money markets or the mobile money payments market was Vodacom with 47% of the market share. And this is compared to Kenya, which the M-Pesa had 76% of the market share. So the market was very competitive as well as distributed. Another reason interoperability has had success in Tanzania was because regulators allowed the industry players to define what the interoperable framework would be for their industry. Along with the help of the IFC as a third party, the industry defined what they believed would be the best framework that would include the most amount of consumers, keeping their own customers in mind, but also creating a fair playing field for any future mobile money platforms. In 2018, GSMA reported that the industry is now more competitive and actually includes more people. And this is because as the interoperable framework was rolled out, the flat fee allowed people to pay anyone on any platform. And the industry actually changed from being competitive about technical integrations like it was before to being competitive about the customer experience and how usable their platform was. So now the consumers have more power in choosing which platform works best for them. And it actually forces more innovation on the firms. To conclude today, I gave a brief background on fintech and financial inclusion, as well as a review of the literature. I talked about how regulatory sandboxes can be mutually beneficial for both the public and private sector and can lead to more innovative financial products and impactful regulation for consumers. As well, interoperability can lead to more financial inclusion should there be cooperation between the industry and regulators. The one big takeaway you should leave from this presentation with is fintech and financial inclusion cannot work and cannot empower the financially excluded without the cooperation between the industry and regulators. Only when the private and public sectors cooperate with the same mission and purpose of financial inclusion do we see actual impactful inclusion. Thank you so much for joining my presentation. I welcome any questions.
Thanks, Dominic. Can you hit the stop share button? Hit this up here at the top of your, oh wait, that's me.
I think you're sharing.
Oh, that was me. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let me put my face back on here. All right, do we have any questions for Dominic? And you can type them in on the little chat button at the bottom. And if you'd like to think about it, I'm curious, Dominic, about where your interest in this topic started.
Yeah, so I started focusing on microfinance, but quickly realized that microfinance was kind of a thing of the past, and shifted my focus to like what was most impactful right now. So fintech really grew my interest. And I was like applying to a lot of like companies for like post-grad jobs. So as I like researched more and more, it's just like the products are really intriguing, and just like the technology overall is really intriguing.
Yeah, wonderful. That was so interesting. Other questions? All right, Dr. Rotaru, would you like to say a few words about your experience working with Dominic on this piece?
I actually really enjoyed working with him. He put so much effort and so much thought into trying to come up with a very thorough presentation. So I think he did great. I really think he did great, and this will definitely expand his horizons of the field, and who knows, maybe even come up with his own social entrepreneurial idea that's related to fintech. I really enjoyed working with him.
Well, that's wonderful. Congratulations, Dominic. That was wonderful. If everybody would like to unmute yourselves and give Dominic a round of applause.
Thank you.
Bravo. Well done. Wonderful. Okay, I believe our next presenter